What is going on, Bills Mafia? Welcome back for another edition of the Go Bills podcast. I am your host and founder of the Go Bills podcast, Brett. I hope you guys are enjoying your Wednesday evening. This is the second edition of the Go Bills podcast training camp preview. We are previewing today the training camp of the cornerbacks, talking about each different cornerback. There is 12 of them that are now on the roster. Remember, rosters are expanded all the way to the 90 players, so we can utilize all the way up to the 90 players, and we will shrink down as the preseason goes on to the 53-man roster. So that's how we're going to be starting. So there's 12 on the roster, working our way down. We will start from the top where the starters are going to be, all the way working down to where the positions of depth will be. Some players that potentially might be practice squad players. So that's how we'll start. We'll start with that, and then we will talk a little bit about how training camp has gone for the Bills in the past few days. Previously, we did talk about the linebackers, and we talked a little bit about the first, I believe, 4 days of training camp. So without further ado, let's begin this and talk about the cornerbacks. We'll start with the departures for the cornerbacks. One of the departures that we had this offseason, the only one that we had, Levi Wallace has left the Bills. He was previously a 4-year starter for the Bills. He had a couple of different battles to go against somebody that was vying for his job for the number 2 cornerback position. He had to battle guys like Tre'Davious, and also battled Josh Norman, battling Dave Jackson as well. So, he was able to fight all of those guys off and then get back into the starting role. So he was an undrafted player out of the University of Alabama, 6-foot corner. And he had an incredible season for the Bills, working his way into the number 1 cornerback position with Trey White coming out, making 58 tackles with 2 interceptions, only allowing 56.2% of his targets thrown his way to be completed, and a 70.3 quarterback rating. He ended up signing a 2-year contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a very, very, very reasonable contract. Only a 2-year, I believe, $4 or $8 million contract. Don't quote me on either one. Not very good with numbers, so I'm just going to throw that out. I have the public school education, so I apologize about that. But a very, very reasonable contract that he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he ended up having to have a big void on the Bills. And we ended up filling it with a few other players. So now let's talk about the additions that we got. We lost Levi Wallace, and we added in first-round pick Kyrie Elam. Another player that we added in is 6th-round pick Christian Benford. A couple other players that we added in later after the draft, Jamarcus Ingram and Jordan Miller, who was recently added in the past couple days. Previously, I had Tavon Fuller in this spot, and I had to do a little bit more research on this, and it ended up screwing me up a little bit with that, but it was a little hard to find some information on Jordan Miller, but I was able to find some on him. The returning players, we're going to start with Trey White, returning again for his 6th season. Taron Johnson coming back for his 5th season. Dane Jackson coming back for his 3rd season. Cam Lewis coming back. He's been on and off the roster. I think it's his 3rd season with the Bills. Nick McLeod, again, I believe another 3rd season. Tim Harris coming back for his 2nd season with the Bills. Siren Neal coming back for his 5th season with the Bills. Elijah Griffin with his 2nd season with the Bills. So without further ado, we will begin from the top, starting with the starters and working our way all the way down so that we can get to know these players. And we'll talk a little bit about them. Some guys we know a little bit more than others. Some guys are the no names that these are guys that we should watch out for on the roster and maybe see what they do during training camp as well as the preseason. And then we'll make decisions on who we think will make the roster towards the end of training camp going into the preseason. So that's where we'll start. This is the series that's going to lead up to that final roster preview. And then we will get into the regular season. So without further ado, let's begin with our all-pro two-time Pro Bowler, potentially three-time last year if he wasn't injured, Pro Bowler, Tre White. Tre White is a 2017 first-round pick by the Buffalo Bills. He did end up signing a massive 4-year, $69 million contract with the Bills last season. He was off to a really good start with the Bills. He didn't allow a single touchdown thrown his way, which would have been an incredible stat if he would have kept that up for the rest of the season. But again, injuries happened. He injured himself in the Thanksgiving game against the Saints. Ended up getting injuring his ACL, missing the rest of the season. So you saw guys like Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson step up into his place. He's currently on the PUP list, physically unable to perform list. Potentially could get lifted off of that list before the start of the season. But however, you know how the Bills like to operate. They just operate like my favorite team in the MLB, the Tampa Bay Rays. They work and try to be very cautious with what they do. And they like to take the way that would get the player to be the healthy the longest. So potentially we might be missing a couple of games from Tre White. Last season, he did have 35 solo tackles, 1 interception, and only allowing a 50% completion rate, which ranks 7th in the NFL. And one thing that I was going to mention about him, he was a 2017 first-round pick by the Buffalo Bills, and I got to poke a little bit of fun at this. As you remember, in that 2017 NFL draft, we did get a pick from the Kansas City Chiefs, which we utilized to draft Tre White, making that trade. So a lot of people have been saying in the offseason, poking fun at us, we had the wide right, and now we have the 13 seconds and everything. They keep saying, oh, well, it's 13 seconds, blah, blah, blah. Well, I got to poke fun at everybody else and say, you guys had Patrick Mahomes. We didn't have Tre White on the team for that game. So for all you guys to say that the 13 seconds and everything, I can say we didn't have Tre White. And if we would have had Tre White, we definitely would have beat you guys. Moving on, we'll talk about, and this could be flip-flopped either way. We have a battle for the number 2 position, the number 2 cornerback behind Tre White. I'm going to put the edge a little bit towards the rookie that we have on our roster in first-round pick, Kaiir Elam. Elam is a University of Florida alum. Started every game as a freshman at the University of Florida. He is a 6'2", 192-pound corner. His uncle is Matt Elam, who used to play for the Baltimore Ravens. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. So very, very fast, very lengthy cornerback as well, having a 76.5-inch wingspan. He is, in college, had the third lowest complete career passer rating with a 55.6% passer rating. Excuse me for 1 second. Some of the cons for him, he is a little bit grabby, especially during training camp this year. Has been a little bit grabby with players, but you do like the physical side of him as a cornerback. He had a couple of issues with Stephon Diggs. Diggs having to tell him, when he was running a route, he pretty much stopped the route and started kind of yelling a little bit at Kaiir Elam, telling him that he was grabbing a little bit too much. Right after that incident, you saw the Bills coaches ended up putting him in boxing gloves, which is something that you don't really see from football players. Some of them do like to box. Shout out Frank Gore, former Buffalo Bill, who does like to box. But you don't see the boxing gloves usually come on in training camp. You see it come on usually after their career or in the off season, but not during the training camp. This tool is utilized for players to not be so grabby, not be able to hold on to the jersey as well as hold on to the back of the pants and stuff like that. So they are teaching him not to be so grabby because that will prevent penalties in the future for the Bills. So he is a little bit grabby, but he's a very physical, very lengthy cornerback who has the ability and the instincts to make tackles at the right time. So he's a very physical, being able to just loves to go after anybody on the field. Big, hard-hitting cornerback that we got in the draft. Our next cornerback, who has been on the roster for the past 5 years, probably one of the better slot cornerbacks in the NFL. You can give that honor to guys like Nickel Roby-Coleman, who has been an excellent cornerback, former Buffalo Bill as well. Shout out to him. So 4th round pick in 2018 NFL draft by the Buffalo Bills in Taron Johnson. In 2021 stats, he did have 1 interception, 7 passes defense, which is great for a slot cornerback. He had a 55.1% completion rate allowed, which he improved from the previous season in 2020. And he was 4th on the team in tackles with 76. He did notch a career high 3 sacks. He is an excellent man-to-man coverage cornerback who loves to hit big and offers great run support for the Bills. And a little bit of a side note on him, he did change his jersey number from 24 to jersey number 7. So if you're wondering and looking around at training camp or at in the preseason wondering who this guy is that's number 24, you're going to be looking at Kaiir Elam, our 1st round pick. But jersey number 7 is going to Taron Johnson, not Dane Jackson. Moving on, and I got a little bit of ahead of myself when I mentioned this man. 2020 7th round pick in the NFL draft by the Buffalo Bills, cornerback Dane Jackson. Dane Jackson was a very raw player coming into the 2021 season, and this man stepped up in the biggest way possible. When your all-pro cornerback goes down and you don't really know what you're going to expect with who's going to be the number 2 cornerback, this man stepped up and played an incredible role for us. I do give a lot of credit to him stepping up. I give a lot of credit to Sean McDermott for helping out as much as possible. And another guy that I will say that I know was in the background chomping at the bit to get information to him is Trey White. So I know that he was helping out a lot. He filled the void of Trey White as well as he could, stepping up as big as possible, playing very well, only allowing 409 yards throughout the season. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. The big stat that blows my mind away. 390 straight snaps, without allowing a touchdown, which was 3rd in the NFL, right behind our man, Trey White. So I guess like Big Brother goes, Trey White having a big year, and then our man, Dane Jackson. Moving on to the next cornerback. Now, this might not necessarily be the way that the depth chart rolls out. This is just my prediction of what I believe the depth chart will look like. Don't really know what it's going to be. We haven't really seen anything yet, but this is just based off of my observations from training camp. The next man that would be on the depth chart would be Siren Neal. Siren Neal is a 5th round pick by the Buffalo Bills, entering his 5th season with the Bills now. He's a converted safety from that switched to cornerback just a few years ago. He has been utilized all over the field, playing that big nickel role. One of the big nickels that we've seen, you see Taron Johnson being that big nickel. Now you have Siren Neal being that big nickel. But he's mostly utilized as a special teams player, being a gunner, which is a big help for the Bills. He goes up as a gunner against he's the left gunner, as Jake Kumerow is the right gunner. So he does have a big role with the team, not really being able to get into the starting role because we have 2 excellent Pro Bowl safeties in Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. He signed a 3-year contract with the Bills at the conclusion of the 2021 season, was a free agent. He was a free agent, and he signed that 3-year deal. During the 2021 season, he did have 23 tackles. He's a 6 foot, 206 pound cornerback now, and he's a big hitter, very physical guy, loves to get in there and make the tackles when he needs to. Very good in run coverage, being able to stop the run in Siren Neal. And one area that I think he could improve on is his coverage ability against tight ends and running backs is somewhere that I think he can improve a little bit. But I really like what I see from him. And one thing that I did see from him after practice a couple days ago is he was with Tre'Davious White and Christian Benford, and he was listening to what Trey White was saying and trying to get better as a cornerback. And that's something that you don't really see from guys that are like 5th year, 6th year veterans. You usually see them go straight to the locker room, not want to be out on the field, get back in, have that turkey burger time that Josh Allen calls it. So you don't really see these players being on the field longer than practice is there, but it's something that I really do like to see from him. Moving on, Christian Benford, a rookie that we just grabbed in the 6th round of the 2022 NFL draft, a 6'1" cornerback who had a phenomenal year at Villanova. He, in his 2021 season, had 39 tackles, 7 interceptions in one season, which is incredible, and 18 passes broken up. These are numbers that you don't really see from a quarterback playing in one season. These are numbers that you see throughout a college career overall. These aren't numbers that you normally see. These are numbers that you see from a guy in the NFL like Trayvon Diggs. Shout out, Stephon Diggs' brother. Wish him all the best in the upcoming season. Those are numbers that you see from Stephon Diggs or Jalen Ramsey or somebody like that. So if he could replicate these types of stats in the NFL and be able to do that, then we have a monster for a number 2 or potentially slot cornerback if Taron Johnson or somebody were to go down as a cornerback. But if he could replicate that and be up there with 7 interceptions, then we have a really, really good secondary in our hands. Micah Hyde had 5 interceptions. Jordan Poyer had 5 interceptions. A few years ago, they were talking about how awesome it would be if every single player in that secondary, Trey White, Levi Wallace, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer had 5 interceptions. Can you imagine if this kid comes in and he has 7 interceptions, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde have 5 interceptions, and Trey White comes back, wins MVP next year, comeback player of the year, and has 5 interceptions? Can you imagine that? I mean, our defense would be unstoppable. Moving on to our next player. This player has been on and off the Bills roster the past few seasons. He was signed at the conclusion of the 2019 NFL draft. He made a Week 1 debut for the Buffalo Bills during the 2020 season. This is a player out of the University of Buffalo, so shout out to the University of Buffalo. And cornerback Cam Lewis. A few years ago, he was in the 2020 season, made his first NFL start against the Tennessee Titans. You may remember him in that game. The first play of the game for a cornerback that's just starting in his first game, and you wouldn't expect this from him. First play of the game, stopped Derrick Henry at the line of scrimmage for no gain. He spent the last few years on and off the Bills roster, mostly as a practice squad player, mostly being on the roster during training camp. His 2021 stats, he played in 7 games, being called up as an elevated player, especially when Trey White was injured, not Levi Wallace. But when Trey White was injured and Levi stepped up into the number 1 spot, and we really weren't sure what we were getting at that number 2 cornerback position, we saw Cam Lewis elevated up to the roster, and he was a very, very good backup cornerback for us and was able to help us as much as possible with depth. But you don't really know what you're going to get out of him. I know the coaches really do like him, and I'd really like to see him develop into a solid coverage corner, which we have seen this offseason. He has done a good job in coverage, being able to go against some guys like Stephon Diggs in training camp and guys like Gabe Davis, not Gabriel Davis anymore. He now likes to be called Gabe Davis. So anybody that didn't know that, Gabriel Davis now likes to be called Gabe Davis. Going up against guys like that, making some passes defense as well as some interceptions, which is great. But really would like to see him be a little bit more physical. That's another area that I think he can improve on. But overall, a good, solid cornerback who should be vying for a spot on the roster against a couple of other players that could be vying for that number 5, number 6 role on the roster. Our next player is another player that's kind of in the same field as Cam Lewis. Has been on and off the Bills roster, but he has been off the Bills roster and signed by other teams. He was signed by the Baltimore Ravens after he was cut following the 2021 training camp. Signed with the Bengals and then moved back to the Bills later in that season is cornerback Nick McCloud. McCloud was undrafted out of the University of Notre Dame, and he signed a reserved future contract after the conclusion of the 2021 season. He has been making some big splashes as well as Cam Lewis has. Most notably in training camp, he has intercepted a few passes from Josh Allen and a few passes from Matt Barkley. So he is making a big statement on the team. I know the Bills really do like this kid, and he could potentially be the type of prototype of a Levi Wallace where you stash him on the roster on the practice squad like we did with Levi, and then potentially if a year or two from now could have a bigger role on the team. But I do expect if he doesn't make the roster, I think this is going to be a priority practice squad signing for the Bills. I really would like to see him develop into a player like Levi did. But I think that, overall there's a couple of other guys that are ahead of him that potentially might bump him off the roster. Another player that the Bills have coming back for his second season, cornerback Elijah Griffin, coming into his second year playing out of the University of Southern California. He's a 6-foot cornerback, 175-pound cornerback. At the University of Southern California, he had 67 tackles, 2.5 for a loss, 1 interception, and he was the kickoff specialist for the Trojans. So he does have a little bit of ability to play some special teams, which I would really like to see from him in training camp, maybe be able to see if he can make an impact on the team and make the roster as a special teams player. Signed with the Bills following the 2021 NFL draft. He spent the entire 2021 offseason with the Bills, as well as the whole entire NFL season with the Bills, only on the practice squad. And one thing that most people don't know about Elijah Griffin is his father is rapper Warren G. And if you don't know Warren G, he has a really good song out there called Regulate, which I love. I've listened to it a million times. It's a song that really pumps me up sometimes. I used to listen to it when I was in football. And it's a song that I just listen to, and it makes me pumped up. Next, we have a guy that was recently added to the Bills, Jamarcus Ingram. I'm sorry, he wasn't recently added to the Bills. He is coming to the Bills from the University of Buffalo, a 6'2" cornerback, so big size. I guess Bills were looking for some size in the offseason. This player did play for the Texas Tech, had 31 tackles, an interception, 2 pass breakups at Texas Tech. He transferred from there to the University of Utah State. And he started 15 games of 19 games there, having 47 tackles, 2.5 for loss, forced fumble, 3 passes defense at the University of Buffalo last year. So again, making the big plays, but we'll see if he can bring that to the next level. Like I said in my previous episode, the NFL stands for not for long. So, what you do in college does not matter in the NFL. You have to be able to bring it to the next level. And hopefully he can. He's a lengthy cornerback, just like Kaiir Elam and Christian Benford and a couple of other guys on the roster. So he's a lengthy cornerback, but again, he does have that uphill battle, and we'll see if he can do something on special teams or in training camp or the preseason to see if he can elevate himself up the roster. Next is the guy that is entering his second season with the Bills, mostly as a practice squad player, but was elevated up to the roster. He has bounced around the NFL a little bit. He is a 2019 sixth-round pick by the 49ers in Tim Harris. He missed all of the 2019 season with a groin injury. He was drafted by the 49ers in the 6th round. Missed all of the 2019 season with a groin injury. Spent the 2020 season on the 49ers practice squad. But after the training camp in 2021, spending it with the 49ers, was waived by them with an injured designation. He signed with the Bills, but was waived in final cutdowns. Signed to the Browns practice squad. Ended up playing in one game for the Browns. Playing one game and one and done. And was released the following day. He signed with the Buffalo Bills on November 29th following the Trey White injury. So was signed to the practice squad. And then after the conclusion of the 2021 season, signed a futures contract with the Bills. Lastly, we have recently added to the roster from the New Orleans Saints, cornerback Jordan Miller. He is a 25-year-old cornerback, 6'2". So I guess the Bills, again, like I said, looking for that length as a cornerback. Tall, lengthy cornerbacks who can get their hands up and disrupt the passes. He's a former 5th-round pick by the Atlanta Falcons. He played mostly special teams with the Falcons. During the 2020 season, he was suspended 4 games for PED use. Landed on the IR later on after that. With an oblique injury, and spent the 2021 season with the Saints on their practice squad. Don't really have much information about Miller because he is a recent addition, so we don't really know what we're going to see from him. But I expect him to be the type of player that was added to the roster as a training camp hole just to get that spot filled in. But I don't expect him to make the roster. Probably not going to make the practice squad just based off of other players that are ahead of him. Now, most people would say with the number of cornerbacks that you have in here, you have the 12 cornerbacks that we have here. Why would I say that we need to add somebody to the Bills based off of all of this? Based off of all the people that are here. And the reason why I say this is because the past couple of seasons with the Bills, we have added to the roster and added that 4th cornerback, the one that would be the backup to Levi Wallace or Tre'Davious White. And we don't really have that experience this offseason. We don't really have that veteran that can come in and take over like Josh Norman or Avonte Davis, who only did it for 1 game. Not even 1 game, only half a game. So you don't really have that experience in a player like that. But I do hope that the Bills can get somebody like a veteran quarterback. There's going to be a few that are probably going to become available based off of their contracts and stuff like that. Or potentially, somebody that hasn't been signed as a free agent that can come in and be that number 4 cornerback, especially with the Trey White injury, especially with, the inexperience of Kaiir Elam coming into the NFL. You would hope that Buffalo would sign another cornerback to be able to just give us a little bit more depth. I think this is an area where we do have some excellent depth, but we have some very, very raw players in here. But I'd really like to see the Bills add somebody else. I think this is an area that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott would like to add somebody else with that $5 million that we do have available, potentially moving up to $7.5 million soon. But I think it's an area that we could see somebody getting added. Now, a player that I'm looking at for the Bills to potentially add, this is a player that has been rumored to be wanted by the Bills, especially a couple of players voicing their praise for him and wanting him to sign with the Bills. Von Miller is one player that would love to have this player. Jordan Poyer, another player. Stephon Diggs talked about him. Is cornerback Joe Hayden. Hayden is a 12-year veteran from the playing for mostly in the AFC North for the Browns and the Steelers. He has so much experience for him. So this is a guy that was a three-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro team a couple of times. Just a player that just makes plays all over the field. I remember him when I was younger, just playing for the Browns and being that shutdown cornerback type. Now, he's not going to be the same player that he was with the Browns, but maybe he can get you a few interceptions and be, about the level of Levi Wallace, maybe a little better than him. But he is coming off of a little bit of a rough season that he had last year, only allowing 60% of his passes completed to him. 3 touchdowns, this 100.1 passer rating, and a 78. He played in 78% of the defensive snaps. So you know that he does have the ability to stay healthy. He is being on the field, but just struggled a little bit. So I think it was a little bit of a slump season for him, a little bit of a digression, but he does have the ability to be the number 4 cornerback for the Bills and maybe step into a part-time role. You see this happen with players that are older, such as, especially in baseball, you see it happen where, a starting pitcher will go into the reserve role and being a relief pitcher. So, that would be nice to see somebody, a veteran like Joe Hayden, coming to the roster. And that concludes it for the training camp position battle for the cornerbacks. But let's move on and talk a little bit about how training camp has been going the past couple of days. We are entering, I believe it's day 9 or day 10 of training camp. Today's portion of training camp was blocked off by the media because it was a walkthrough. So we will be back at training camp for the next one, the next day. Some observations that I have seen. Again, Isaiah McKenzie is making plays left and right on the field. Stephon Diggs looks great. Looks like he's in season form. Von Miller and Jordan Phillips looking great again. Like what I see out of them. One player that I really have been happy with is Ed Oliver. Just making plays all over the field, and it looks like nobody can stop him. An area that I think the Bills are struggling in, especially with the injuries that have happened with guys like Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins going down, as well as Roger Saffold being gone because of his injury. The offensive line has not been doing so good. With the rotations and everything that they have, it just looks like the offensive line isn't doing so good. I know that they are battling, trying to get the right 5 going into the season, but it's an area that has a little bit of concern for me. But I think we will figure it out, especially with our new addition in Aaron Cromer coming in. I think we will get it figured out, and we will pick back up from there. But that's one area that I think we have struggled in. A couple of other things to add in. We had a couple of injuries. Our star safeties, both of them have been injured. One of them, Micah Hyde, is coming up, has a hip injury. And Jordan Poyer, who was recently injured in the last practice that was open to the media, hyperextending his elbow and will probably be out for at least a couple weeks. Hopefully we will see him for week 1. I expect him to be back for week 1, and the expectation is being back for week 1. So that's an area that kind of sucks, but these guys are veteran players. They don't really need the experience in the preseason, and they don't need to get injured, so we need them healthy for the regular season. But other than that, that's about the only injuries that I have seen for the Bills that are major injuries that hurt us. There's been a couple of other ones that are tweak injuries and players that will be back as soon as possible, probably day-to-day players. But other than that, that's the only players I've noticed. Other than that, I think that covers everything, guys. We will be back very, very soon. I don't know which day we will be back, but we're going to do another series on this. Keep it going, keep it rolling. Tune in for that. Keep up with us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, as well as Twitter. And starting very, very shortly, we will probably, after the conclusion of this season, being on our new website, which we are trying to roll out as soon as possible for you guys because we want to get as much content to you as possible. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for tuning into our podcast, tuning into our account, following us, liking us, subscribing to us, everything that you guys are on. If you guys are interested in anything in particular, give us a DM on Instagram or Facebook or on Twitter. Hit us up. We would appreciate that. We love each and every one of you. We're thankful for each and every one of you, and we cannot wait for the season to begin. So let's keep it going. We'll keep it rolling, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening. Remember, like, subscribe, follow us on social media, and as always, go Bills. Again, this is Brett with the Go Bills podcast, and we will see you guys next time.